the Minimalists.
Hello, simpletons. You may notice something different right now. By the way, I'm Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. If you're watching this on video, you'll notice that I am in my kitchen right now, and Ryan is in the studio with Podcast Sean. And
we wanted to take social distancing to the max.
This is like heaven for me. Finally, Ryan, I'm able to live out my dreams. I ordered a bunch of mayonnaise jars from Amazon.
Oh my God.
I'm going to be peeing in them for weeks.
Oh, dude.
No, actually, I'm home because I have some cold symptoms. I don't have any reason to believe that I have come into contact with SARS-CoV-2, which is the actual name of the novel coronavirus. People often confuse the coronavirus with COVID-19, which is the resulting disease from SARS-CoV-2. And so, just to be safe, I'm pretty sure I just have a cold. I don't have any of the major symptoms of COVID-19. I don't have a fever. I don't have a cough, but I do have some symptoms. I am not asymptomatic. And so I'm recording this from home, and this is a nice little experiment, I think, for us, Ryan. I think you would agree that... Yeah. Right now,
yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of podcasters do things remotely, and it comes out great. And yeah, I mean, it is a good test. I think it's always better for us to be in the studio together, but this is a great plan B, I feel like.
Yeah, and these are some extenuating circumstances, and so today I wanted to talk about how to live through this, and that's a bit of a double entendre. Like, obviously, we want to live, right? Mm-hmm. Like we want to survive this, even if we do get the resulting disease, COVID-19, even if I do have that right now, which I don't suspect I do, but even if I do, we want to live through that, but also we want to live through this, like truly live to the best of our abilities considering the circumstances. So I was hoping, Ryan, you and I could record a somewhat of a quickie episode over the next 20, 30 minutes and talk about some things that we can really make the best of an unfortunate situation, because I do think after a lot of reading, a lot of contemplation, a lot of self-quarantining, I do believe that we are going to see some pretty trying times ahead of us. And
totally agree.
I don't mean to sound alarmist, and in fact, I want to be the opposite of alarmist. I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think a lot of these changes are going to get us outside of our comfort zone, and that's a really good thing. You know, you go back and read the Stoics, and they're going to tell you that if you just stay within your comfort zone, you're going to atrophy. And so this will be a time of growth for us, but not in the way that we think about growth, right? It's not GDP growth. In fact, Ryan, I was just walking down Melrose Avenue today. I was taking the advice of my doctor, one of my doctors, and getting some sun, and it was a ghost town. I mean, it was... there were blocks. I walked several blocks on Melrose Avenue, which is like a shopping mecca, right? And many blocks, not a single person walked by me.
You know what's interesting? I went to Griffith Park earlier today to hike where the old abandoned zoo is, and it was like a Saturday. There were so many people and animals.
Oh yeah, so I think getting out in nature is one thing that we can do right now, and to use this time wisely. In fact, when we're social distancing, that it doesn't mean that we have to not go out. It doesn't mean we have to stay in our homes perpetually. In fact, that can be unhealthy because it can be mentally unhealthy. It can be depressing. It can be upsetting for a lot of people. And so we can still practice social distancing in nature and getting sun, getting out in the natural environment. And I find that if we use this time for that, we're going to be slowing down. All of us are slowing down. And a lot of us are affected. Our careers are affected. I know, Ryan, you and I, we've had quite a few financial setbacks because of this, but those are inconveniences, and it's unfortunate. Thankfully, we have an emergency fund, and we may have to tap into that. But we had to cancel an entire tour, or at least postpone it for now, and we don't know how long it's going to be until we can reschedule that. So right now, it's effectively canceled, and we had to stop production on our next Netflix film. less is now. And we had to reschedule all of that, and we're in the midst of rescheduling it, but it's going to take a lot to reschedule it. And also, things are up in the air with the podcast, obviously. We're going to keep doing podcasts. We might have to try some remote things like this. I know it's not the most ideal situation, but we want to make the best of these circumstances. And so, Ryan, I put together a few things. I pulled together a few things for this because we did the pandemic preparation episode with TK Coleman and the subsequent Maximal episode called Coronavirus, which just came out. And there, I think we covered 95% of the things I wanted to cover. But the things that we didn't cover is I wanted to give some people some additional perspective and maybe some reasons to be hopeful in these times of uncertainty, of worry, of anxiety, of despair. And the first thing that I thought of here was our friend Paul Saladino, Dr. Paul Saladino. He's a medical doctor. He had a scientific look at the coronavirus on his podcast recently, and he shared this quote. Let me pull it up. It's on my Twitter account. You can follow me over there. It's just at JFM if you'd like. But he had this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the Buddhist monk. You all are probably familiar with him. But this quote really stood out to me, and because a lot of us are panicking right now, or semi-panicking. Ryan, I think I shared with you a photo. If not, I'll send it to you. But a photo of, I went to Target this morning before they opened, and there was a line down the block to get into Target at 7:30 a.m. or whatever it was. And I just needed to buy regular supplies. I wanted to buy a bottle of Lysol, and so I showed up with a mask on because I have a cold and I don't want to get anyone else sick. I also had gloves on, and there was a line, and there were a lot of people panicking. As soon as they opened the doors, people went running for paper towels and running for all of these things. And really, that's not behaving like a member of a community. In fact, it's the opposite. People are panicking. We need some people to display calmness right now. And so this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh was this: "When the crowded refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person stayed calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive." And so while I was in Target this morning, I paused. I let everyone do their panicking, their rushing. They weren't acting like community members. They were acting like selfish, solipsistic hoarders. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But instead of rushing along with them, I stopped by, kept keeping my distance from the workers there, but about 10 feet away, I went up to some workers and said, "Hey, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate the fact that you're here. I know these are scary times, but everything's going to be okay, and you're really helping out." And after saying that to quite a few workers, you could see, like, oh, they needed this calm person because they felt the anxiety of all of these other anxious people who were literally door busting. We used to use that term back in our retail days, Ryan, the doorbuster sales, but that's kind of what was happening here today at Target. And so
I'm so glad you bring that up, man, because like that is, for anyone listening to this, when you see someone doing their job, going about it normally, like every time I see the post office worker, I had to go to the post office earlier today because my grandmother, who is retired, lives in Florida, has no toilet paper. The retirement home she's at gave her a couple rolls, but I had to go. I basically found some facial tissue. She couldn't even find that, not online, not at a store near her. So I had to go to the post office and mail her some facial tissue. And along the way, it was like every worker I ran into, I'm like, it really means a lot that you're doing this, because if you weren't, society truly would start to break down even more than what people think it is. So going out of your way and just saying thank you to those people, that's huge. That goes so far.
Yeah, what you're talking about there, Ryan, is sort of restoring some humanity, because right now, we talked about this on the preparation podcast, and you can go back and listen to it. It's episode 224 of the Minimalist podcast. And we talked about how you're going to see the best of and the worst of humanity. Do your best to be the best part of humanity right now. And I would like to make an argument right now that these so-called preppers are often the least prepared for a crisis. And the reason I say that is you can't trade canned corn and ammunition for the support and trust of a loving community. I can tell you, Ryan, every place is out of hand sanitizer right now, right?
Yeah.
And I walked to my corner gas station, and they usually sell hand sanitizer, right there at the counter with the gum. They have like a little bin of it. And so I walked in there to buy some gum a couple days ago and a Topo Chico. And I said, hey, do you have any hand sanitizer left, Padilla? I greeted him by his name. And he was like, oh, no, we don't, but I saved one for you. And it's funny. I just talked about how the preppers are least prepared for this, and you can't trade the stuff for a loving community. Mm-hmm. And I tweeted that, and there was someone who said, the problem is you can't eat the trust of a loving community. And my response to that was, it sounds like you've never experienced a loving community. Because I know right now that if for some reason, Ryan, I ran out of food at my house, or I ran out of hand sanitizer. In fact, it's funny, that same day that I ran out of hand sanitizer, I went to go get a prescription filled at my local pharmacy. It's a compounding pharmacy, and they know me well. I walk in, they know me by name. And he's like, hey, man, do you need any hand sanitizer? I'm like, not really. I just got a bottle. He's like, I can compound some for you if you'd like. Like we don't have any in stock, but I'd be happy to compound some for you. I really and so he's a member of my community. He was looking out for me. And I know that if I ran out of food, or I ran out of toilet paper, I ran out of paper towels, that I've done enough to contribute to my community up till now that I can certainly find someone who's willing to lend a helping hand to me.
Yeah. It's interesting, because you keep saying the word prepper. I'm part of this men's group, as you know, and there's a gentleman who is part of this group who is a prepper. And we had this, it was 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting, and he was just going through, his ammunition and all his supplies that he has, and all the canned cream corn, whatever it is. Yeah. But really, where his focus was, it was community. And what he was talking about is he was like, I have these things so I can take care of my community, because I'm going to need community more than I need canned corn. But I am prepared for you guys to come here. And he had a whiteboard and list every single one of our names were on it. In a crisis situation, we were pretending like it was a crisis situation. There were these jobs listed out with each of the names, and it was just amazing, man. And I guess all that to say is, I think there's a difference between running in and door busting. I don't think those people are preppers. I think they're hoarders. And I think they're panickers. Yes. And I think that's what we need to avoid doing. I love Trader Joe's right now. There's a line to get in Trader Joe's. They're only allowing a certain amount of people in. I had to go a couple of days ago. Totally got in. They had plenty of stuff. They give you a little heads up. Hey, you can't buy more than 2 of one thing, which isn't a big deal at all. And the store is more empty than any other, the slowest time you could think of during the week. And they do that intentionally to stop people from panicking, because they realize that the store is crowded and the shelf starts to empty, the panic starts to set in. So seeing Trader Joe's do something like that to help people not panic, it's unfortunate that they have to put those regulations in place. Right. But yeah, really what I'm just trying to get at is the worst thing we can do is panic and then react to that panic. I've totally felt panicky during this. But sure. I haven't reacted towards it. I've had to take a lot of deep breaths. I've had to sit there and tell myself, okay, it's going to be okay. And it is going to be okay. But yeah, I wish that, the people door busting and buying hordes of toilet paper, I wish they would think twice before doing panic buys. It's not even an impulse buy, it's a panic buy.
Right, and what you're doing is you're actually hurting your community in those situations. Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you did it, great. You can't change the past right now. But what you can do is now, if you have excess, you can try to help someone who is in need, because otherwise you're doing the opposite of being part of a community. You are you are simply creating your own fortress, your own toilet paper fortress here, right. And or food fortress or whatever. And so I can tell you one thing that I'm doing, Ryan, is I'm not shopping differently from how I was before, with one exception. I used to go to the grocery store about 2 to 3 times a week, and I'd buy smaller quantities. Now I'm going once a week because of social distancing. And I'm still buying the same amount that I would for a week. I'm just buying it in one day as opposed to going 2 or 3 times throughout the week.
I'll tell you what, man. I will never take for granted being able to just pop into the grocery store. Because Mariah and I do the same thing. It's like we kind of plan our meals out 1 or 2 days in advance. Because Trader Joe's is right there. It's so simple. And we get to go for a little walk and get groceries. I mean, completely different situation now. And I don't know, man. I don't. Is there anything else that? And I'm not trying to pivot away from what you were talking about, but it just makes me think about all these things that we take for granted that we're now noticing. Like, oh wow, like just a simple thing is going to the grocery store. A simple thing is being able to be in a recording studio together when you have some, mild cold symptoms. A simple thing of getting guests to come out here. I mean, there's so many things that it's hitting me in the face. Like, I just didn't even realize I was taking for granted.
Well, let's talk about that because I think what's going to happen now is, yes, we're realizing it because we can't go to a lot of these places. They're either closed because they have self-regulated or, depending on what state you're in, I just saw today in Ohio, Mike DeWine is shutting down all the barber shops even.
Oh, wow.
And so... and beauty salons and all of that. So those are all, again, things that we tend to take for granted. I can just go get a haircut, right? I can walk down the street or drive a mile or 2 away and get a haircut. That's not a problem. Well, I actually can't do that right now if you live in Dayton, Ohio, for example. And so that's something we take for granted. Now, here's what's going to happen, Ryan. I'm not clairvoyant. I can't predict the future. I'm just speculating here based on, I have a lot of experience in retail, and so do you. You and I both worked in retail during the heydays of the Audis. We also worked in retail and managed a lot of retail stores in 2008 when the bottom fell out of the market. And here's what I can tell you. 3 months ago, you remember this, Ryan, I was predicting a retail apocalypse before all of this coronavirus stuff hit. And what I noticed now, just walking down the street today, is there's more and more empty shops, and a lot of these are mom and pop shops that they're unprofitable the first 21 to 28 days of the month. That means they make all their profit. They're in the red the vast majority of the month. The last 3 to 8 days of the month usually is where they are profitable, which is usually fine if you're open 30 or 31 days a month. But right now, you're going to have places closed for at least 2 weeks. I think it's going to extend much farther than that.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to go back to these places, and they're not going to reopen. There's going to be a lot of gyms, a lot of restaurants, a lot of studio spaces, jiu-jitsu studios, and bars and barbershops and salons and all of these different places that actually just aren't going to reopen after this. And that is going to cause a bit of a spiral, I think. This isn't to make anyone panic. This is to say, you talked about the difference between hoarding and preparing earlier, Ryan. This is to say, be prepared and also be appreciative for what we have. If you are someone who works in the service industry, and I know a lot of people listen to this podcast do, and Ryan and I worked in the service industry for a very long time, you can pivot, and now is a good time to pivot because there are going to be a lot of service jobs that are going to be different, right? If you work at your local bar or local restaurant, you may, for the time being, be out of a job. It doesn't mean you can't do something else. The nature of service is changing, and so a lot of delivery places are really ramping up how many people they are hiring, and that doesn't mean just working for some of these apps like Postmates or someone like that, although that's a good short-term solution. But a lot of these places have their own delivery people. And so realizing that the service industry is going to, I think, make a dramatic shift. I think the retail industry is going to make the shift it was going to make over the next 18 to 24 months. That shift is going to be made over the next 12 to 16 weeks.
Yeah, totally agree. There is... what I'm hearing you say is that there is a recession coming. I mean, if you already look at the stock market and businesses you already hear business owners talking about how they might have to shut their doors. The question is not if, it's when. And then when it starts, when this coronavirus thing, I don't know if it's going to take a vaccine to get us through this, or maybe the numbers will start to drop off with all of this social distancing and these curfews that are being put in place. But maybe, we'll be able to recover. But, my inclination is to say, it's going to take, what did you say, 6 to 12 weeks? It's going to take 6 to 12 weeks.
12 to 16 weeks, probably.
Okay. Yeah, so 12 to 16 weeks. It might take us 12 to 16 months to try to just start to get back to normal.
Yeah, and in fact, I feel like we're about 18 months away of getting back to normal. But I'm going to put a caveat on that. It's going to be a new normal. And I think we're actually going to see immense growth from this. I was talking to our mutual friend, Sean Mahalik, today. He teaches my writing class with me. He's a very talented novelist. And we were just going back and forth today. And he said, I think some incredibly positive stuff is going to happen in the world once this virus is under control. And we're going to adapt in powerful ways, economically, medically, governmentally, technologically. And through these times, you're going to see a lot of innovation. We're going to see fewer things that are touch-based. Doors are going to start opening like they did on Star Trek, and a lot more things are going to be voice-activated, including elevators, and the medical field is going to change. We realize, like, oh no, we only have 100,000 ventilators and 400,000 beds in the United States.
Yeah, dude, that's nuts. We'll actually have an epidemic response team in place, probably.
Yeah, we just might again, and so we're going to learn a whole lot from this. And in the meantime, I want to just say this: we're talking about what to do. Everyone knows to wash their hands. Ryan and I aren't getting on here to tell you to wash your hands and keep 6 feet away from people. You already know that. We know that for the time being, that's the best thing to do. But let's also talk about how we can use this time wisely. Because quarantining, this is now the time for you to really create. We're not going out and consuming anymore. All that consuming we took for granted, most of it we're realizing right now, I didn't need to do that in the first place. And now this is being thrust upon me, right? Yeah. This is the time to create. And I'm not saying you have to create your masterpiece right now, but maybe you've always wanted to write a short story. Maybe you've wanted to write a book. Maybe you've wanted to start a blog. By the way, we've got a great guide to start a blog. It's just theminimalists.com/blog. We've had over 20,000 people use that thing to start their own blogs. It's exactly how we started our blog 10 years ago. And it's the best creative decision we've ever done because it led to all these other things with the podcast, the tours, the books, the films, etc. It all started with starting a blog. Or maybe you want to start a podcast. Ryan and I have a guide for that as well. It's just theminimalists.com/microphone. And maybe you wanted to learn a new skill, guitar or yoga or something else. Now is the time to do that because you have the time. And yes, of course, you can spend it watching reruns on Netflix or whatever. And of course, there's a time and place for that. Or maybe you wanted to read a bunch of books. You probably have a bookshelf full of books you haven't read. Now's a good time to start cracking into those. I'm trying to finish this book with you, Ryan, right now. Love People Use Things. And I'm going to be using this time to finish this book. And I'm reading more books as a result, reading more articles. And you know what I'm going to do less of is I'm going to read less about the coronavirus. I think it's good to be informed. I think being bludgeoned with information is a bad thing.
Yeah, and constantly be watching out for breaking news is going to break you.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's so
Tweet
well
that
put.
podcast, Sean.
Well, Ryan, I've got this article. I want to read some of it because I think it will be helpful here. It's our friend Cal Newport. He wrote the book Digital Minimalism, and he has this blog post, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. But it's called On Digital Minimalism and Pandemics. And it goes a little something like this. One of the more profound representations of the soul in the Western canon is the chariot allegory from Plato's Dialogue. And it says, the charioteer of human soul drives a pair, and secondly, one of the horses is noble and of noble breed, but the other is quite the opposite in breed and character. And then he goes on to say, as elaborated by the character of Socrates in the dialogue, the charioteer represents our soul's reasoned pursuit to cultivate a worthy life. This task requires the charioteer to allow the noble steed, representing our moral intuitions, to lead the way, while preventing its ignoble partner, presenting our base instincts, from drawing the soul off course. In digital minimalism, I use this allegory to help understand how to navigate both the promises and the perils of modern technology. The minimalist, I argue, deploys technology in specific, intentional ways with the goal of empowering the noble steed. The maximalist, by contrast, deploys technology casually, allowing it to immeasurably boost the strength of the other horse. I'm bringing this up now because it occurred to me that these ideas have probably never been more relevant than amidst the anxiety caused by the coronavirus pandemic. In this current situation, for most people, the constant monitoring of online news about the virus is providing pure fuel to the ignoble steed, dragging the allegorical chariot away from what's good and awe-inspiring about life, even during turmoil, and toward bottomless anxiety and pseudo-paralysis. The ignoble steed always craves more of this attention-catching information. What if something extra terrible just happened? What if I find a link that makes me feel better? But in this feverish pursuit, the charioteer loses control. There is, I propose, a simple two-part solution to this state of affairs. First, check one national and one local news source each morning. Then, and this is the important part, don't check any other news for the rest of the day. Presumably, if time-sensitive updates that affect you, if there are any, they will arrive to you directly by email, phone, or text. This will be really hard, especially given the way we've been trained by social media companies over the past decade to view our phone as a psychological pacifier. Which brings me to the second part of the solution. Distract yourself with value-driven action. So he goes on to say, this doesn't mean abandon all technology. I'll let you read the rest of the article there, Ryan. But
no, I love this article.
We have two walkaways.
He is showing us how to stay informed instead of drowning ourselves with information or drowning ourselves with technology, for that matter.
Totally agree, and that's the thing. We can use the technology to our benefit. We could check it once in the morning, make sure that the world still exists outside the walls of our quarantined homes, and then. And this is the big part. After that, focus on, he says, creating something of value, or doing something value driven. But I would say create something of value, right? Yeah. Do something that is worthwhile. And we talked about some examples there. But there's something you've been meaning to do, and I just haven't had the time. Well, guess what? Now you do. Time was an excuse before, and you did have the time. We all have the same 24 hours in the day, but now you're recognizing it. Use those hours wisely.
Amen.
I think maybe we wrap it up on this. There's a tweet from Mike Birbiglia, his stand-up comedy special.
The wise philosopher Mike Birbiglia.
Yeah. His new comedy special was really great. It's about parenting. If you're a parent, you'll really enjoy it. It's on Netflix. Anyway, his tweet says, "Let's be honest. Social distancing from a few certain people has been nice."
Oh, wow, that's great. That's great, man.
Yes, indeed. So, Ryan, let's just say this. Now is not a time for alarm. It's not a time for panic. It is a time for awareness, for caution, for vigilance, and for acting accordingly. Yep. It is a time for social distancing. It's for acting appropriately, because we want to be responsible for the people around us. Even if you're not scared of the virus for yourself, you may pass it on to someone else. Even if you pass it on to a kid and they're asymptomatic, they may pass it on to a grandparent. And if that grandparent is really struggling with their health, then the mortality rate is upwards of 20% for people over 80, and older people in general are at much higher risk here. If you're looking for a deep dive into the science, we'll put a link into in the show notes. Paul Saladino really broke down the science between SARS-CoV-2 and also the first SARS virus, which we know as SARS, right? When you hear about SARS, it's just SARS-CoV-1. The differences there between that and also the flu virus and MERS and some different viruses, but also what we can do to keep our immune systems healthy during these times. And Paul believes that if you have a strong immune system, that's really going to be your best defense in all of this. It's not going to prevent you from getting COVID-19, but it will certainly help you fight it off if you do.
Yeah. No, I think it's important people, they do dig into the science, because some of it, I don't know, some of it makes me panic more, but then other pieces of it kind of alleviate some of the crazy, panic that I do experience. But ultimately, man, like, this is what I hope this quickie episode does for people. It helps them, to panic less. I hope it helps them to, first and foremost, take care of yourself and make sure you're healthy and that your friends and family, that they're taken care of. But also ask what you can do for your community. Is there an elderly person next door you can help out with? Los Angeles is a different place right now, man. Like, it is. I have never seen people so friendly in LA, and it's unfortunate that it takes something like this to happen in order for people to act that way. But I am grateful for it, and as long as we keep treating each other well, and as long as we keep taking the appropriate precautions, we're gonna get through this just fine. But before you go and buy 67 rolls of toilet paper, make sure someone else has it before you take it all.
Yeah. Let's think about others. Obviously, we need to think about ourselves, but let's think about others and realize that you are going to be just fine. Even if you don't have toilet paper, you're going to be fine. And maybe, just maybe you needed this challenge right now. Maybe this is going to put you in that discomfort zone, and maybe you needed that. Maybe you're going to thrive because you're getting through this time of survival, and it's going to make you stronger as a result. Maybe you needed this reset. Maybe I did too. And maybe we all needed to slow down a bit because we were going a little bit too fast, and we can't keep going at that speed forever. We're going to experience some whiplash, but guess what? We're all going to heal. Let's heal together. All right, y'all. Love people. Use things. See you next time.
See ya. Thanks, guys.
The Minimalists.